Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today I'm going to review one of the creepiest slow burn adventures for Call of Cthulhu, the Forby Masterwork, an adventure available in the brand new Cthulhu by Gaslight Keeper's guide, but actually written decades ago. Now, those of you who have watched my channel before know that I'm a huge fan of gothic horror. Give me a creepy manor house, hidden passages, suspicious servants, old family portraits with unsettling eyes, and something shambling around in the gardens at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm a very happy GM. But here's the thing. Call of Cthulhu doesn't actually do that style of horror very often. Sure, there are some haunted houses, there are old mansions, but typically in Cthulhu horror, the investigators inevitably discover a cult, stumble upon some eldritch horror from beyond the stars, and everything turns into tentacles and sometimes Tommy guns. The Forby Masterwork goes in a completely different direction. It feels less like modern Lovecraft and more like you're playing through an old black and white horror movie or an M.R. James ghost story. There are no cults, no elder gods, and no magical rituals. It's a slow burn Victorian mystery where everyone in the house has something to hide. There's a family curse, a missing fortune, and a mysterious green man that wanders the grounds after dark. While I won't spoil it yet, there is a fearsome and unnatural creature here, but its horror comes from its origin, not its appearance or abilities. If this sounds intriguing, then keep watching. I'll warn you, however, there are spoilers ahead, so if you're thinking about playing in this adventure, I strongly recommend you head to a good British pub and order a good pint instead. But for those who fear not such things, dim your gas lamps, lock the doors, and maybe don't look out the bedroom window tonight, because not only am I going to give you a full review of the Forby Masterwork, I'll also give you GMs some tips and tricks on how to run this adventure like a pro. The Forby Masterwork was originally written by Penelope Love back in 1993. It was in the Sacraments of Evil sourcebook, but it's now been brought back in the new Cthulhu by Gaslight Keeper's guide, and honestly, I think that's exactly where it belongs. This adventure feels quintessentially Victorian. It's dripping with gothic atmosphere from beginning to end, and feels very different from a 1920s or modern adventure. The adventure runs about 30 pages, and I've completed it in a single 4-hour session, although we ended up skipping through some of the material at the end, so I'd estimate that it will take most groups between 4 and 6 hours to play, depending on how much your group enjoys poking around different locations and thoroughly interrogating NPCs. But my recommendation is to run this adventure in a single sitting if you can. The mystery builds so steadily that I think it loses momentum if you were to split it across multiple weeks. The setup is this. The investigators receive a telegram from Harry Forby, an old schoolmate who's become mysteriously ill despite the fact that he's only 30 years old. Harry believes that he's suffering from the same brain fever that nearly killed him as a child, and before he dies, he wants his friends' help solving a mystery that's haunted his family for generations. You see, hidden somewhere on the extensive grounds of the Forby house lies the family's legendary treasure. Harry thinks this treasure hunt will not only be good fun for his friends, but also help save his family's finances, which have become a little fragile over the years. No one knows exactly what this treasure is, although the best guess is that it's an emerald the size of a hen's egg, at least based on what's depicted in an old painting in the house. This painting features Harry's grandfather, the brilliant but unstable sculptor who built the estate, Nicholas Forby. No one knows where Nicholas Forby hid this gem. Every generation of the family has gone looking, but none have found it. And the Forby estate is huge, consisting of a big manor, 40 acres of grounds containing dozens of Greek-style statues sculpted by Nicholas, a mausoleum, and other classic Victorian buildings that you'd expect, like an ice house, a carriage house, a stable, etc. Now, if this sounds like the setup of a cozy treasure hunt, it is, but don't get too comfortable, because within about 15 minutes of arriving at the Forby house, your players will realize that practically everyone living here is keeping secrets from everyone else. Poor Harry himself is mostly bedridden, constantly complaining about his headaches, and prone to sudden outbursts. His wife Gertrude spends every waking moment trying to keep the household functioning while carefully avoiding one of Harry's episodes. Her brother, John Meddler, a young ex-officer, seems friendly enough, but he awkwardly keeps bringing up strange local ghost stories at exactly the wrong moments. And even the servants are on edge, seeming to know more than they're willing to admit. The old groundskeeper, Old Fred, also sometimes is happy to bring up old stories of old gods and curses, and he quickly jumps on John Meddler's stories and makes them more spooky and creepy when they get mentioned. And soon, the PCs even find out that a few nights before they arrived, the estate suspected prowlers or poachers were sneaking around the grounds at night. And that's because a few nights ago, Harry and his butler Bates hid in ambush, expecting to catch the thieves that have been prowling around the grounds, but instead, Harry saw something that caused him to panic and faint away immediately. He refuses, or is perhaps unable, to explain to anybody what exactly he saw. And soon Harry's brother-in-law, the man named John Meddler, mentions the existence of the Green Man. Apparently, the locals have been talking about this thing for generations. It's supposed to be a strange, moss-covered figure that wanders the grounds of the Forby estate after dark. Some think it's just an old country legend, others swear they've actually seen it. Harry absolutely hates talking about it. Gertrude changes the subject, and John Meddler just seems almost amused whenever it comes up. Now, right away, I think this adventure does something clever here with the setup. Your players know that they're playing Call of Cthulhu, so they expect something supernatural to be involved. But the adventure immediately muddies those waters by introducing 3 different mysteries all at once. There's the missing and unclear treasure to find, there's the prowlers and maybe this green man wandering the estate at night. And then there's Harry's mysterious illness. Why does this guy have brain fever when he's only 30 years old, but still seems on the edge of death? The players will naturally assume all of these things are connected, and they are, but not in the way players will think. But this threefold mystery is what's going to keep them investigating and make them very eager to start that investigation. There's not just one obvious way to go at the beginning here, there's several. But before we continue with what happens in the adventure from this point on, let's go back into the past to explain the backstory behind this adventure, which will also reveal this entire Forby mystery. Harry's grandfather was Nicholas Forby, a famous artist and sculptor. He was obsessed with classical Greek and Roman sculptures. But his greatest technical achievement was figuring out a secret process that made metal unusually malleable. But years of working with these metals also exposed him to lead poisoning, which caused him bouts of pain, lethargy, manic productivity, and paranoia. He is pretty crazy after spending his whole life figuring out the secrets of metal. But after retiring to Forby House, Nicholas became suspicious that his wife Alice was having an affair with his best friend, the painter Christopher Lehman. His suspicions were correct, and worse, Nicholas also discovered that his son, Alistair, that's Harry's dad, was actually Christopher's child, not his own. Consumed by jealousy and rage, Nicholas killed Christopher. And in a fit of murderous creativity, he used his secret casting technique to create a new masterpiece. He molded thin metal around Christopher's corpse, named this new statue Icarus, after the Greek myth, and hid it in plain sight on his estate. He also concealed the secret formula to his advanced metalworking technique inside a glass green egg, which he jammed into Icarus's mouth. He wanted to keep his secret hidden from his son Alistair to prevent him from profiting from his life's work. So the treasure is not a gemstone, it's the formula hidden inside this jade egg. Near the end of Nicholas's life, he regretted what he had done, and he expressed a desire to see his murdered friend again. Although I think he was pretty crazy at this point still, and might have been wishing for his own death. The statue Icarus awakened, powered by the hatred and dark secrets that surrounded this entire affair. Icarus still contained the vague memories of the murdered Christopher Lehman, and he mistook his old friend's desire as a command, and he strangled Nicholas Forby before returning to his place back on the estate. Icarus became the foundation for this local legend of the murderous Green Man, waking up on the hottest summer nights and wandering the estate still looking for vengeance against Nicholas Forby. Years later, when Harry's father Alistair eventually discovered that he was illegitimate, he figured out what had happened, he ended his own life, even as the statue was approaching him. By now, Icarus was no longer bronze, but all covered in verdigris. And as a child, Harry saw this green man with his dead father looming over him and lost a lot of sanity points. Now, years later, Icarus is still on the estate, slumbering in some overgrown bushes. He hasn't awakened in some time. But Harry's brother-in-law, John Meddler, has decided that he can push Harry over the edge. Knowing the story of the Green Man, those legends, and knowing that Harry is fragile and is especially bothered by it, John Meddler dresses up like the Green Man every now and then and terrorizes poor Harry. He hopes that Harry will die from his brain fever and exhaustion and fright, his wife Gertrude will inherit the estate, and he'll benefit. Kind of a bit of a Scooby-Doo plan there, John.
And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids.
So the players have a lot to figure out, because there are two threads here to follow. One is the mystery of Icarus and the Forby family's secret formula, which will get revealed through old letters and writings that the PCs can find scattered throughout the house. And two, that John Meddler is dressing up at night as the Green Man to drive Harry insane or kill him outright from fright. The adventure itself is a sandbox, with the players having free roam of the house, its grounds, and a little bit of the surrounding town of Granton's Bridge. And as they explore, the adventure defines events that will happen, which are structured along a timeline, with these events laid out over 3 days and 3 nights. And like a lot of timeline-style adventures, this starts easy and gets more complicated to run. On day 1, it's super simple. You just kind of read the section of what happens and you roll with it. But of course, as your players deviate, create their own drama, and motivate NPCs to act differently, a timeline approach here requires more GM improvisation to keep the adventure moving. So for example, when I played in this adventure, we had one mystery mostly wrapped up by the end of day 2, which was much earlier than the adventure was expecting, which meant that we then missed events that were supposed to happen on later days to help us solve the other mystery. The GM should have just moved those events around organically, but he didn't, so our group struggled to figure out one part of the plot. So the lesson here is, as you're dealing with an adventure like this that's very open-ended with a timeline, don't treat that timeline as gospel, and don't be afraid to pull things up as needed. You just don't want your players stuck or bored or not knowing what to do. For the most part, however, this investigation requires the players to explore the house, its grounds, and talk to the various NPCs to piece together the mysteries. Although the PCs can venture into the town of Granton's Bridge and visit the pub and the family doctor, these are largely unnecessary visits. This whole adventure really will take place at the estate. One of the first places the players will hit, of course, is the estate's library, where there's a lot to find, including historical papers about the Forby family, their paranoia, and their eccentricities. The papers are missing key sections, however. But the biggest clue that can be found here in the library is behind that portrait of Nicholas Forby, the one that has him holding the gemstone.
Look, a marvelous portrait showing the treasure by famous artist Christopher Lehman too. What say we yank it off the wall, tear it open and see if there's a riddle inside?
There's a riddle here. The Titan's fire and the gleaming shield shall show the way. This riddle points to a Prometheus-themed fireplace in Harry's son's room. His son is named George and is an annoying little 9-year-old who loves to antagonize the PCs. And also in his room is a stained glass window with a depiction of Perseus's shield. This room hides a lot of family secrets. Interestingly, this is a much more straightforward version of the riddle versus what appeared in the original version of this adventure. That one was an iron dog with eyes of fire shoots sparks in Apollo's bower. I like this original riddle better because it's more Victorian and poetic, but it is harder for our modern ears to fully grok, so take your pick. But I do like that the newer version of this adventure moved the fireplace from the library into little Georgie's room so the players have an antagonistic kid to deal with to gain entry. This update adds a lot of fun role-playing elements to the puzzle solving, and as a GM you can really have fun making Georgie a nosy little brat. Regardless of which riddle you use, the PCs now have what they need to find the treasure. By fiddling with the fireplace's andiron, the thing that holds the logs in a fireplace, it reveals a secret priest hole, a cubby under the floor, that has the rest of Nicholas Forby's papers in it. And these papers, when paired with the ones they investigate in the library, totally reveal Nicholas's descent into madness. They heavily implied he murdered his friend and did something horrible with his body, and also hid his treasure near Icarus on his property, with a way to use light to reveal his location. And so the players have to figure out that they need to position a bright light. They can find an old Drummond work light in Forby's old workshop and shine it through the Perseus shield in the window at night, and it will illuminate exactly where Forby's treasure and Icarus is hidden. This puzzle can be hit or miss with players, which is probably why this part of the adventure has been altered the most from the previous original version.
So we will shine a light through the shield of Perseus and it will reveal the location of Icarus. Now, I'm not a physics person, but it seems unusual that the light's going to magically tilt down from the second floor into the estate gardens, but I guess they didn't think of that when they moved this window between versions of the adventure.
But both versions of this puzzle largely still have the same issue because there's two things to do with this riddle and room, not just one. The players need to discover Forby's missing papers and use the light to find Icarus. But if the players unlock the priest hole with the letters, they might assume they solved the whole riddle and may forget about the light in the window. And vice versa, and probably more likely, if they solve the window light and find Icarus, they may not think about the priest hole or ever get the letters that tell the end of Nicholas Forby's story, which may leave them a little confused. The adventure seems to know this, and Harry's doctor, who lives in town, Dr. Jeffries, has a letter in his possession that talks about the priest hole, but A, the players are probably not going to talk to the doctor since he's off the estate, and B, his letter simply says there is a priest hole, not where it is. So my advice here is to give the players a little leeway and make sure that they discover both clues in this room. I like to do this. I have annoying little Georgie spy on the PCs throughout the whole adventure. He's just always one room away listening. So he's spying on them when they find the riddle on the back of the painting. He won't understand the whole riddle or shield thing. He's only 9 years old, but he'll get that there's something up with his fireplace. Maybe that's why he wants to lock the players out of his room and keep them away. He wants to find the treasure for himself. He won't, of course, but if the players don't discover how that fireplace andiron unlocks the priest hole. Maybe Georgie will try to put out the fire and fiddle with it himself and probably burn himself in the process and blame the PCs, but he'll give them the hint that there's something more there with the fireplace if the players miss it.
Why is little Georgie sticking his hands in the fireplace? Doesn't he realize we've already solved the puzzle in this room?
Or, if the PCs actually manage to befriend the little bastard that happened in my last game, he can actually help them by tipping them off that he knows that there's an outline of a secret area under his rug, but he's never been able to open it up. Basically, use little Georgie to help unblock the PCs if necessary, or if they're moving too fast, he should challenge and block them by being a brat. But eventually the PCs will trace the light through the window to the statue of Icarus, green and covered in verdigris, lying on his back, tangled up in thorny bushes. Inside his metal body, the hollow body, is the jade egg, but the PCs will need to crack him open to get to it. But any damage to Icarus horrifically brings him to life. Once awakened, Icarus trudges towards the house, determined to kill Harry, who he mistakes in his confused head for his old friend Nicholas Forby, who murdered him. Don't turn this into a regular fight. Once Icarus the statue creaks to life, describe how Icarus is moving slowly, inexorably toward the house. I actually put my PCs on a timer at this point. I give my players about 6 turns to stop Icarus before he bursts into the house and starts looking to strangle Harry. And then I roll dice with a 20% chance each turn that he finds and kills Harry in the house. And as he walks, he just flings the PCs brutally out of his way. Since this is the big supernatural confrontation of the adventure, you need to make it count and not just make it a slugfest with 4 or 5 investigators just shooting away on a statue. And it's especially true that you have to make this an interesting encounter because Icarus is tough. He has 4 points of armor, so he can shrug off most attacks, including revolvers, and a swat from him does 2d6 damage, which can easily kill a PC in a blow or two. PCs are going to have to be very coordinated to take him down without injury before he kills Harry. But with Icarus defeated, the PCs will finally discover that the treasure is not the emerald egg itself, but what's inside. Nicholas Forby's rare metallurgy procedure. It's worth a fortune if the PCs can figure out what it is and sell it. But the players likely have another problem to solve. John Meddler, Harry's brother-in-law, is still running around at night, disguised as the Green Man, terrorizing Harry. So for the PCs to really claim victory and save their friend, they also have to stop Meddler. The easiest way for them to do that is a stakeout at night, looking for the Prowlers, and realize that this Green Man or the Prowlers seem to come from the quarry, which is kind of just off the estate's grounds. Searching the quarry will reveal that there's a small work hut there with Meddler's costume inside. So this is actually a pretty straightforward mystery. But what's challenging here is that while the two mysteries do interconnect, my own experience is that the Icarus Jade Egg mystery will take precedence with your players. Finding a mysterious treasure sounds way more fun than chasing down Prowlers, and so it's very likely that the PCs will find the treasure and have their showdown with Icarus long before they stop Meddler. And then this feels weird from a pacing perspective because the Icarus mystery is the big supernatural finale and the family's secret reveal. Meddler's goofy little disguise plan feels like a sideshow in comparison. So, as a GM, advise that you make catching Meddler easier than finding the treasure. Roleplay Meddler a bit provocatively. He's charming, but he will take little jabs at Harry whenever he can. And Harry should jab back. He should especially comment about how poor Meddler is in comparison to himself. Just make it obvious that these two don't love each other. And then when the PCs inevitably stake out the place at night, don't make it too hard to realize that the Green Man is fleeing in the direction of that quarry. For sure, don't let this mystery extend much past night 2. I think the adventure even has a scene in the timeline where Meddler kills old Fred, the groundskeeper, who kind of busts him at night. but I usually advance that a bit. I have that happen on night 2, just to make sure the PCs are taking this part of the mystery seriously and don't forget about it. And then, once the PCs bust Meddler, Harry can encourage them to keep up the treasure hunt and mention that he's afraid Meddler was maybe working with other people. So now you can have the real Green Man, Icarus, appear the next night after they've caught Meddler, a hot night, and confound the players a bit when they glimpse this other Green Man. They thought they stopped the one, and now clearly they haven't. That'll be a great moment. But when the investigators can stop Icarus and expose John Meddler, Harry finally begins to recover. The Green Man that haunted him since childhood is destroyed, the man who's been deliberately trying to drive him insane is exposed, and the mystery that's cursed the Forby family for generations is finally put to rest. And in an unusually happy ending for Call of Cthulhu, Harry may even get the family treasure he was looking for, although it turns out to be different than the giant emerald he expected. And that's the Forby Masterwork. So what do I think? Overall, I think this is a great moody and textured adventure, one that role players will love. But I do want to address some of the issues that I have with this adventure. I played it first as a player and then GM'd it later as a keeper. First, in both scenarios, I firmly believe that this is an adventure that works better with a smaller number of players. I think 3 is perfect for this adventure. The reason is that the main challenges of this adventure is exploration and role-playing in a very small contained setting. Having 5 or 6 investigators running in a pack throughout a small house just feels unnatural, takes away a lot of the role-playing opportunities, and honestly, some players will just get left out. Second, the GM has a lot of exposition in this adventure to manage. The mystery here depends on understanding Nicholas Forby, his wife Alice that was cheating on him, his best friend Christopher, his bastard son Alistair, his grandson Harry, and what happened to this family across several generations. That's a lot of dead people with interconnected relationships, and that doesn't even include the living characters in this adventure like John Meddler, Bates the butler, Old Fred the groundskeeper, etc. The adventure can feel like one diary after another, often out of order, and unless players are paying close attention and reading all the handouts, it's confusing. Fortunately, the adventure does include a family tree. Give this to the players in the library right away. It helps a lot. And honestly, if your playgroup doesn't like reading handouts and role-playing with NPCs about their family history, this might not be the adventure for them. Third, there are some bottlenecks here. The scenario relies on players examining the right objects, interpreting riddles, finding the priest hole in the fireplace, understanding Nicholas's papers, and eventually connecting everything together to Icarus. It's not hard if you have all the material, but if the players miss one step or become convinced that the treasure is literally like an emerald or buried chest somewhere on the estate, the investigation can stall. There are always jokes, which I usually don't take too seriously, that Call of Cthulhu adventures often revolve around a single spot hidden roll, but this adventure could be one of them if you don't GM it the right way. Be generous with idea rolls and allow for redundant clues or giving the NPCs some extra work to do here versus let your players miss one puzzle and suddenly stop the adventure. Again, I love using little Georgie as this annoying little kid who spies on the PC, so he always has a reason to be in on the investigation at key times, but he's never going to be smart enough to solve anything for the players. But you can also flesh out the servants to help more in this regard too. But if your group loves cozy mysteries, likes untangling dark stories, and is up for the freedom an open-ended investigation gives them, the Forby Masterwork is a very solid adventure. Like I said at the top, it captures the essential feel of a Victorian adventure so well, and it just totally feels different than other Call of Cthulhu adventures. I'd recommend it as a kickoff to a Gaslight campaign or a great one-shot when your players are just looking for something new between their regular games. If you enjoyed this review and want to see more horror and Call of Cthulhu adventure reviews like this one, hit those like and subscribe buttons. And if you've ever played in the Forby Masterwork I'd love to know what your story was like. Let me know how it went in the comments below. Until next time, I'm JC, and just remember, if you ever see a portrait on the wall of a guy holding a treasure, just rip it right off the wall and look on the back because there's bound to be a riddle.